Hi, this is Dr. Peter Osborne, founder of Gluten Free Society, and today I have a special interview with Dr. Rush Jaffe, who is agreed to be part of our medical board of advisors. And so I wanted to just have an intimate conversation with him about gluten and some key components around gluten. Dr. Jaffe, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
So can you tell our audience a little bit more about your academic and clinical background?
Well, yes, I did internal medicine and biochemistry training at Boston University Medical Center. I then received a commission in the United States Public Health Service and was assigned to the National Institutes of Health Clinical Center in Bethesda, Maryland, where I did a residency, got double board certification in laboratory and chemical pathology. Stayed on the permanent senior staff, actually led the residency program in laboratory medicine at one point. And each year I was there, I had the privilege of introducing a new method that has more or less become the standard method, whether we talk about occult blood testing for early colon cancer screening. That was something we did in the early 1970s. There are even better tests today, but then it was a big step forward. Looking at how platelets are activated during blood clotting, which relates even to this COVID-19 virus that people are concerned about. And so I decided in the early 1980s to apply myself to functional immunology. Because when our immune defense and repair system is functioning well, we feel and function well, and we're resistant to what's going around because we have a competent immune defense and repair system. However, too many people, because of a lack of the essential, what I will call the good stuff, and too much of what I will call the bad stuff, are at risk because their elective protective mechanisms are not functioning because they're not giving the essential antioxidants, minerals, vitamins, nutrients, cofactors, dietary input that allows them to digest, assimilate, and eliminate what they eat without immune burden. And unfortunately, a lot of people have digestive problems that lead to a whole series of microbiome problems that underlie a lot of what we would call chronic ill health today.
So on that note, with the GI tract and lack of repair mechanisms and lack of proper nutrition, as it relates to celiac disease, the incidence of celiac itself has remained roughly the same, but so many people are gravitating toward gluten-free diets and gluten-free lifestyles and finding that it's very beneficial. What do you think is behind the increase in people having this gluten difficulty?
Well, the grain of today, whether we talk about wheat or soybeans, the grain of today, including rice, is not the grain of our grandparents. It probably contains glyphosate. It probably contains a host of anti-nutrients and has probably been bred for certain qualities like higher sugar and lower protein. And so the grain of today is not the grain that we think of as the staff of life. Now, what you said, Dr. Osborne, is correct. The actual incidence of true celiac disease has remained about the same since I was a young physician half a century ago. And I learned about it from Don Donaldson and Franz Engelfinger and other giants of gastroenterology who happened to cluster in the Boston, Massachusetts area at that time. So we have a lot of people who don't have a strong digestion. They don't have a healthy digestion. And grains are hard to digest because all grains have gluten, and gluten is hard to digest. So what we have today is a lot of at-risk people who have weak digestion and therefore should avoid grains. They can have grasses, but not grains.
And help explain the difference a little bit between grains and grasses in terms of gluten.
Well, right. By definition, all grains have gluten. Now, the wheat gluten is slightly different, and the oat gluten is slightly different than the rice gluten, but all grains have gluten. All grasses are entirely gluten-free. The easiest way to explain it is you can make a bread-like product out of any grain if you know how to do it, but you can't make a bread-like product out of a grass because it won't stick together. So grasses are easier to digest. They are whole. They provide fiber. They provide nutrition. They provide prebiotic fiber. The probiotic organisms in a healthy digestive tract like to feed upon the grasses. And the grasses include buckwheat and quinoa, millet, wild rice, turns out to be a grass. And I may be overlooking one, and I apologize if I did, but the grasses are recommended because they're easy to digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden.
So from the perspective of those differences, then the grasses themselves, easier to digest, easier to process, contain nutritional value, and don't put pressure on an already broken gut for many of the standard American diet followers, and you know, the average person who really doesn't know much about nutrition and who just eats kind of that standard American diet.
Well, yes, the standard American diet is SAD. If you do the acronym for Standard American Diet, it comes out SAD. And we have now several generations of people whose palate, whose mouth, whose taste buds, whose nose has been addicted to things that look like food, but they're really highly processed and chemicalized, and they're not food. And so we do need a makeover back to the future of wholeness, nature, nurture, and wholeness, especially about what we consume. If only because what we consume is the fuel that fuels our body.
So what you put in is what you get out. Talk to me a little bit about...
I want you to eat well and drink better.
Both make perfect sense to me. And I oftentimes say, you know, the standard American diet, the food that people call food is Franken food, because it's really it resembles food, but doesn't really fit the definition of anything that really provides great degrees of nourishment.
No, you're absolutely right. And in the packaged goods industry, it's known as the crave factor. We want to have the fat, salt, and sugar content so that you crave more and more. Well, that's good for sales, but that's not good for your digestion or for your quality of life.
Couldn't agree more. Tell me a little bit. I know you're involved in clinical practice and research, and I'd love to hear some of your experiences and how a gluten-free diet has benefited the outcomes in individuals. Can you share some stories or share some examples?
Surely, and yes, I do research, including community-based outcome studies. We have a successful study in type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. We also have the most successful community-based study in fibromyalgia, muscle pain. And I was prepared to do these kinds of studies because of my prior background at NIH and at Boston University. But I do not have a private practice of my own. What I have seen is exactly what you're pointing to, Dr. Osborne. A rise in maldigestion, dysbiosis, enteropathy, which is atrophy of the digestive tract, and an ill-defined area called leaky gut, which is probably pretty accurate, indicating that stuff that should be held back and further digested to elemental building blocks is able to wiggle through, get through, or somehow get into the body through the intestinal wall, because that intestinal wall is not being repaired well enough. And usually those people have a lack of surface area in their digestive tract. That means even if they are taking good food and good supplements, they may not be absorbing it very well. So rehabilitation of the digestive tract in people who have had years or decades of the kinds of processed and restructured foods that we both agree look like food, but it's not food. And we want to get back to whole foods that you can use at home in an appetizing way, because you include seeds and nuts, or you include spices and herbs, you include sea vegetables and seaweeds, you include edible flowers in your salads. And you make salads a central part of your consumption. So I think that when people are willing to, quote, take yes for an answer about getting back to basics and eating well, staying well hydrated, and that includes, drinking better in the metaphor, we can save upwards of 1 million lives a year. We lose 500,000 people to the ravages of diabetes, and diabetes is a choice. We lose 250,000 people to nutritional deprivations, and that's, in America, that's a terrible sacrifice, a terrible waste. And then we lose another 250,000 people to the stresses of a healthcare system that is largely determined by your zip code and your socioeconomic status. In most of the world, healthcare is a right of citizenship. In America, it's a privilege based on how much you can afford. Well, we all deserve better than that. And in the 21st century, we are marinating in a sea of toxic substances, some of which come in through the manipulated grains. And that's another reason to avoid the grains, but to have the things that you can digest easily and effectively as part of your rehabilitative program, not just for the digestive tract, but the whole microbiome, the whole communion that occurs between what we take in orally and what's happening at the intestinal wall and just inside the intestinal wall, where there's about half of your body's immune defense and repair system waiting to either recycle something that is foreign that gets in, or to make an immune response against it if that adaptive reserve is necessary.
Well said. Very well said. Where can we send people if they want to learn a little bit more about your research and what you do? Is there a particular website where we can send them to get more information?
Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, drrusselljaffe.com is one resource. There is also healthstudiescollegium.org, which has more of the deep dive science and has posted chapters and review articles that over the years we've had the privilege of writing and getting into the peer-reviewed literature. And then we have betterlabtestsnow.com, which is a consumer information resource about these kinds of predictive biomarkers and self-assessments, and including interpretations that make the information more than just a page of typeface of data. We want people to understand the meaning of the results in relation to the best outcome value for each of the tests that's offered, and then we help people with lifestyle programs to bring out their human healing responses.
Fantastic. And we'll put those links just below the video notes here. Dr. Jaffe, I really want to say thank you and just let you know how appreciative we are of your research, of your work in this field. It's been profound, and it's helped us in our endeavors change and save lives. So I just want to acknowledge you for that and let you know just how appreciative I am of what you've done. And thank you so much for being part of our medical advisory team here at Gluten Free Society.
No, it's a pleasure to join with you and to help speed the transition from the current sick care system to one of healthful caring. So thank you, and thank you for all that you do.
All right. Well, you have a wonderful afternoon, and we will talk soon.
Yes, indeed.